I have read more books, so let's review them, shall we? Hi, my name is Stacy. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, over here we do movie, books, and series reviews. If that sounds like your thing, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more. The first book is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. The main lesson in this book is not judging a book by its cover. With that said, if I was to judge this book by its cover, I would definitely buy it because it has a beautiful cover. Call it vain if you want to, but sometimes I judge books by their covers, and this one has a pretty cover. I love the vibrant colors, and just from the cover alone, the world that the book seems to introduce us to looks really fun. There's also this juvenile feel to it that makes me think I'll be introduced to this creative and lovely fantasy world that will make me feel the same way I felt when J.K. Rowling first introduced Harry Potter to the world. But in case you're a Harry Potter fan watching this video, this book is very different from Harry Potter. Let me look for a book blurb. I think I'm gonna look for one on Goodreads. By the way, I recently decided to be active on Goodreads, so if you're on that app and feel like following me, check out my reviews on Goodreads. A magical island, a dangerous task, a burning secret. I still maintain it's very different from Harry Potter. Linus Baker leads a quiet, solitary life. At 40, he lives in a tiny house with a devious cat and his old record. First of all, anything to do with cats, I'm already interested, so this book was already calling my name. As a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth, he spends his days overseeing the well-being of children in government-sanctioned orphanages. When Linus is unexpectedly summoned by extremely upper management, he's given a curious and highly classified assignment: travel to Maas's island orphanage where 6 dangerous children reside. A gnome, a sprite, a wyvern, an unidentifiable green blob, a rare Pomeranian, and the Antichrist. Yes, you had that right. One of the orphans is the Antichrist. And just like Linus, I'm not gonna lie, this bothered me at first. But as the story continued, I realized that the name was just used for shock factor, but the character himself is very different. Linus must set aside his fears and determine whether or not they're likely to bring about the end of days. But the children aren't the only secret that the island keeps. Their caretaker is the charming and enigmatic Arthur Parnassus, who will do anything to keep his ward safe. As Arthur and Linus grow closer, long-held secrets are exposed, and Linus must make a choice: destroy a home or watch the world burn. An enchanting story masterfully told. The House in the Cerulean Sea is about the profound experience of discovering an unlikely family in an unexpected place and realizing that that family is yours. The House in the Cerulean Sea is set in a world where normal human beings coexist with individuals or creatures with magical abilities. Linus Baker is a regular human being who has been hired by the government to look into the orphanages that house children with magical abilities. His job involves visiting these orphanages, observing and conducting interviews, and then writing up a report based on his findings. The reports he makes are one of the key determining factors on whether the orphanage he's talking about should be shut down or should continue running. Linus is very good at maintaining an objective opinion, and that ability is what has captured the attention of his superiors. Due to his reputation for impartiality, he's chosen to investigate an orphanage that is said to house children that can be very destructive because of how powerful they are. Linus is sent on a secret mission to assess the House in the Cerulean Sea. He is meant to observe, gather information, and provide his professional opinion on the situation at hand. The crucial question is, of course, whether the orphanage should be shut down or allowed to continue. Are the children a significant threat to the world, or can they be integrated into society and make positive contributions? This story is a magical one with really nice and unique world building. When it comes to fantasy books, sometimes the first chapters can feel like a dictionary, rapidly explaining the world building before the story starts. That can get very tedious to read. However, with this book, the world building is seamlessly integrated into the story, allowing you to immediately picture this fantasy world alongside the narrative. With that said, I do also understand why some books start by first explaining the world the reader is about to enter before the story picks up. If I came across a book like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings and this happens to be how we're introduced to the fantasy world, I will understand that. But sometimes it definitely gets boring reading a book if it's written in this manner. So it was refreshing reading The House in the Cerulean Sea in the style that it's been written in. Even though this is a YA book, it does make sense that it was written in that way. The world building sparked my imagination, and at the end of it, I too wanted to know what it's like to live in the house in the Cerulean Sea. One of the characters is a gardener, and I'm not sure if a garden has ever been hyped up this much, but after reading it, I want to see it so bad in real life. Speaking of the characters, I found them to be quite distinguishable from each other and fleshed out to a believable degree. I primarily consumed this in audio form, and having narrators helped create a distinct, well-rounded image of each character. But even if you pick up a physical copy or e-reader, I still think this book has been written so well that each character is still gonna feel fleshed out and distinguishable. I wholeheartedly think that this book was a good book, but it does have its own flaws that can't be ignored. The first and main thing that was so frustrating to me is how preachy the entire book felt. One of the main themes is to give people the opportunity to show you who they are, instead of labeling them or stereotyping them based on superficial things. At the end of it all, I understood the message that was being passed on, but I can't say that I was convinced by this story. I agree with this way of thinking, but if it wasn't a principle that I subscribed to even before reading this book, I'm not sure I would have been convinced. The preachiness of this book was very annoying. Instead of simply telling the story and letting the reader pick up the lessons, it had to spell out every single lesson you're meant to pick up. Even in the pages where you've already gathered what point is being put across, a few paragraphs later, you will be told this is how you should feel about the previous text. Another qualm I have with this book is the improbable way that everything was resolved. Once Linus made his decision and wrote up his report, it felt like things went too smoothly in his favor, to a point where it all seemed too easy and unrealistic. The outcome he wanted was realistic, but I think he should have encountered more friction in trying to get it. Aside from that, I will say this is a wholesome, simple, yet fantastic read. Book number 2 is Daisy Jones and the Six. This is one of the book picks from Reese Witherspoon's book club, and it also got turned into a series on Amazon Prime. So it's safe to say that this is one book that has garnered a lot of popularity, which is why it was so disappointing for me to end up hating the story. Okay, maybe hate is a strong word, so let's go with I didn't like Daisy Jones and the Six. I just did not resonate with any of the characters, and no matter how hard I tried, I also did not connect with the story. And I did try because I finished the entire book, and not once did I think about DNFing it. That is how much hope I had that if I keep reading, I'll eventually see what everyone else loves about this book. But until the end, I never did. Everyone knows Daisy Jones and the Six, but nobody knows the reason behind their split at the absolute height of their popularity. Until now. Daisy is a girl coming of age in LA in the late 60s. Breaking into clubs on the Sunset Strip, sleeping with rock stars, and dreaming of singing at the Whiskey A Go-Go. The sex and the drugs are thrilling, but it's the rock and roll she loves the most. By the time she's 20, her voice is getting noticed, and she has the kind of heedless beauty that makes people do crazy things. Also getting noticed is the Six, a band led by the brooding Billy Dune. On the eve of the first tour, his girlfriend Camilla finds out she's pregnant, and with the pressure of impending fatherhood and fame, Billy goes a little wild on the road. Daisy and Billy cross paths when a producer realizes that the key to supercharged success is to put the two together. What happens next will become the stuff of legend. The making of that legend is chronicled in this riveting and unforgettable novel, written as an oral history of one of the biggest bands of the 70s. This is written by Taylor Jenkins Reid, who is also the author of one of my favorite books. You know, a story is good if it sticks with you long after you finish reading the book, and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is that story for me. Unfortunately, it's not the same with Daisy Jones and the Six. Taylor definitely has a way of storytelling that is enchanting, so even though I don't like this book, I can still understand why it's very popular. For me, it left me feeling numb. I felt nothing, except for feeling very vexed about all the toxic relationships in this book. For sure, that comes with the territory. I mean, we're talking about money, fame, sex, drugs, and losing yourself. So it's not a shocker that there are very toxic relationships in this story. But what vexed me is the way some of them are being portrayed as okay or acceptable. How can you have a partner who does such horrible things and then go about and say that you understand because you married a musician and this is life with a musician? Please no, that's not, you deserve better. Just leave and go find somebody who will treat you like a human being. But aside from that, the story left me feeling empty. I wasn't touched by the happy moments, the hopeful moments, and I wasn't affected by the moments that were clearly meant to be sad moments. I'll chalk this one up to it just wasn't for me, but clearly for other people, they read it and found it to be so amazing. So this book really depends on each person. Next up is another read by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This one is called Malibu Rising, and I'm glad to say that I had a more positive experience with this story compared to Daisy Jones and the Six. Malibu Rising is about 4 famous siblings who throw an epic party to celebrate the end of the summer. But over the course of 24 hours, their lives will change forever. Malibu, August 1983. It's the day of Nina River's annual end of summer party, and anticipation is at fever pitch. Everyone wants to be around the famous Rivers. Nina, the talented surfer and supermodel, brothers Jay and Had, one a championship surfer and the other a renowned photographer, and their adored baby sister, Kit. Together, the siblings are a source of fascination in Malibu and the world over, especially as the offspring of the legendary singer Mick River. The only person not looking forward to the party of the year is Nina herself, who never wanted to be the center of attention and who has also just been very publicly abandoned by her pro tennis player husband. Oh, and maybe Had, because it is long past time to confess something to the brother from whom he's been inseparable since birth. Jay, on the other hand, is counting on the minutes until nightfall, when the girl he can't stop thinking about promised she'll be there. And Kit has a couple of secrets of her own, including a guest she invited without consulting anyone. By midnight, the party will be completely out of control. By morning, the River Mansion will have gone up in flames. But before that fast spark in the early hours, before dawn, the alcohol will flow, the music will play, and the loves and secrets that shaped this family's generations will all come bubbling to the surface. Malibu Rising is a story about one unforgettable night in the life of a family. The night they each have to choose what they will keep from the people who made them and what they will leave behind. Malibu Rising is written in the same world as The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I actually didn't catch that as I read the story, because while both books give you the feeling of reading a larger-than-life story, the characters and how they influence the plot made for unique and distinct stories. It was only after reading some reviews that I found out that the famous singer Mick River in Malibu Rising and actress Evelyn Hugo in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo do cross paths in Malibu Rising, even though it's only for a brief moment. It's a common belief that people often become their parents, or they actively strive to be nothing like them. This book is an excellent phenomenon of how that exactly happens. I found it enlightening in terms of how generational trauma is passed on, even when you're well aware of what the problem is or was. I worked at a traditional marketing and advertising agency a while back, and I remember there's a time we were reviewing this ad that basically showed how people who have experienced abuse in one form or another, especially growing up, have a high chance of also becoming abusers themselves. At that time, I thought that was such a paradoxical effect. So back then, I did a bit more research and I understood how this comes to be. I would say this book is a great example of how generational trauma is knowingly or unknowingly passed on, and how it presents itself in the next generation. Despite being a story that is centered around a party, Malibu Rising is a book with a lot of heavy themes. And while I liked and enjoyed the story, I don't think that I connected with it deeply. I do, however, think that if it's a book that you deeply resonate with, it will probably leave you in tears and also leave you hopeful at the same time. For me, I did find it to be a book worth reading. There were passing moments where I did resonate with the story and I also felt for the characters, but those moments were fleeting. If I were to sum it up, I think I'll paraphrase a review that I read on Goodreads. Someone said that this book is a perfect example of how rich people will do anything except go for therapy, which is what the characters in this book needed. I don't think I can sum it up any better than this person did. On to the next book, which is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the first and only book that I DNF'd among all the books that are featured in this video. Avery Grimes has a plan for a better future. Survive high school, win a scholarship, and get out. But her fortunes change in an instant when billionaire Tobias Hawthorne dies and leaves Avery virtually his entire fortune. The catch? Avery has no idea why or even who Tobias Hawthorne is. To receive her inheritance, Avery must move into sprawling, secret passage-filled Hawthorne house, where every room bears the old man's touch and his love of puzzles, riddles, and codes. Unfortunately for Avery, Hawthorne House is also occupied by the family that Tobias Hawthorne just dispossessed. This includes the 4 grandsons, dangerous, magnetic, brilliant boys who grew up with every expectation that one day they would inherit billions. Grayson Hawthorne is convinced that Avery must be a con woman and he's determined to take her down. His brother Jameson views her as their grandfather's last hurrah, a twisted riddle, a puzzle to be solved. Caught in a world of wealth and privilege, with danger around every turn, Avery will have to play the game herself just to survive. The Inheritance Games is the first of a book series of, I think, 4 books. The second book is The Hawthorne Legacy. The third book is The Final Gambit, and the fourth book is The Brothers Hawthorne. I DNF'd the first book, so I definitely won't be reading the rest. I might ramble on about this story, so I'm just going to give a spoiler warning before I continue. I'll add timestamps to this video, so if you do not want any spoilers, you can check the timestamps and skip this part. I think we connect to fiction and storytelling in general because stories remind us of or make us recognize something within ourselves. They can also teach us something new about ourselves, about others, or about the world in general and how it works. For that to be the case, the story does need to feel probable, at least to some degree. For this book, everything about it felt so improbable. The idea that some old rich guy spends his time spying on this teenage girl, just so that when he dies, he can disinherit his entire family and give his money to this teenage girl is just unrealistic to me. Surely somebody who managed to build so much wealth has better things to do with their time. And if that's the story, it would have made sense if Avery had a strong connection to the Hawthorne family. But if I'm not wrong, it turned out to be a distant connection, which was kind of dismissible to me. Or another reason that would have made more sense is if the Hawthorne family members were sinister in some kind of way that justified them getting disinherited. I reached chapter 52 before I decided to stop reading this story, and 52 chapters later, we still don't get a good reason as to why this man decided to disinherit his entire family and give billions of dollars to a stranger. 52 chapters in, and it all seems like he just likes playing games, and that's why he did all this, which seems a bit impractical to me. I looked up spoilers because I wasn't going to continue reading this book to get the answers, and mainly because everything felt so unrealistic and I just couldn't get into the story. So the answer is, instead of getting his grandsons some much-needed therapy, he thought he should disinherit them and make them go on this wild goose chase to figure out why they were disinherited, even though whether they figure it out or not, they'll still not get back the money. The math was just not mathing for me. Lastly, the mystery aspect of this book felt lackluster for me. I thought it would get interesting, but at no point did I begin to wonder why this guy decided to leave all his money to some stranger and disinherit his family. If he likes playing mind games or playing games with people or doing puzzles and stuff like that, he's dead. He's not gonna even see how these games play out or like what the outcome of everything will be. So almost 200 pages in, and I was still not interested in anything about this story. So we can also chalk it up to this isn't my cup of tea. And finally, the last book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, a very popular book on TikTok and YouTube. Like, seriously, I have seen so many reviews about this book. Akata is a read that I haven't finished, but I am not going to DNF it. I have just taken a break from the story, so this review will cover up to where I have reached. So the book blurb goes something like this. When 19-year-old huntress Farah kills a wolf in the woods, a terrifying creature arrives to demand retribution. Dragged to a treacherous magical land she knows about only from legends, Farah discovers that her captor is not truly a beast, but one of the lethal, immortal fairies who once ruled her world. At least he's not a beast all the time. As she adapts to her new home, her feelings for the fairy Tamlin transform from icy hostility into a fiery passion that burns through every lie she's been told about the beautiful, dangerous world of the Fae. But something is not right in the fairylands. An ancient, wicked shadow is growing, and Farah must find a way to stop it, or doom Tamlin and his world forever. Akota is also the first book in a series of 5 books. The other books are A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and lastly, A Court of Silver Flames. I think from this point I should also mention that I'm also giving spoilers for this book. So if you don't want any spoilers, just check the chapters and skip this section. The story starts with our female character Farah out in the woods hunting. The world building has been done so well that you can clearly build a picture of what is happening and what the surroundings look like. If I were to compare it to something else, the beginning kind of felt like the Hunger Games and us having a visual of Katniss Everdeen hunting. Farah is the youngest of 3 children. She has 2 older sisters. Nesta is the oldest while Elaine is the middle child. At a certain point, Farah's family was extremely wealthy, but their dad ended up making a bad business deal that landed them in extreme poverty. They lost everything, and to add on to that, some of the people that the dad owed money to beat him up so badly that he ended up being crippled. When it comes to Farah's mom, she died when Farah was still young, but before her death, she made Farah promise that she would take care of the entire family. While hunting, Farah kills a wolf that turns out to be a fairy, and that's how we're introduced to the other characters in this story. So we have regular human beings, and then we have fairies. And these are not the cute fairies we know like Tinkerbell or maybe the Winx. These are lethal, extremely powerful, and scary fairies. They have magical abilities like being able to alter someone's perception of reality, making somebody unconscious. They can shapeshift into any form they want, and of course, a bunch of other things that I haven't found out yet. Afterwards, Tamlin, who happens to be friends with a wolf that was killed. I had every intention of finishing filming this video in one day, but somehow my battery died and the day just got away from me. So here we are on a different day, picking up where we left off. So Farah kills the wolf that happened to be a fairy. Afterwards, Tamlin, the fairy's friend, finds her and demands retribution for his friend's murder. Tamlin gives Farah 2 choices. Either die right there and then, or agree to go to Prythian, which is fairyland, and it is also where Tamlin lives. If she goes to Prythian, she will stay there for the rest of her life, and she will never get to see her family or come back to the lands that humans occupy. The second answer seems way better, except for the fact that humans and fairies have never gotten along. Long ago, humans were enslaved by fairies, and this led to a huge uprising and also fight for freedom. Not all fairies were for the enslavement of humans, so some joined the battlefield alongside humans. Many human and fairy lives were lost, so in the end, to stop the bloodshed, a compromise was agreed on. A wall was built to separate humans and fairies. Fairies got to occupy certain areas, and so did humans. Despite this, humans still lived in fear of fairies because a single attack from a fairy could take out a lot of human lives. That and the fact that Farah was the only one capable of feeding and taking care of her family made both choices suck, but eventually end with a lot of persuasion from her dad. Farah does agree to go with the fairy Tamlin and live with him in Prithian. Prithian turns out to be quite different from the lands that humans occupy. Fairies are powerful, magical beings, and they also happen to be immortal in a way. So in Prithian, they live in unimaginable opulence. The only problem the fairies have is at some point a plague started spreading in their land, and this plague seems to weaken their powers. So Farah is taken captive by Tamlin, who turns out to be a very powerful fairy, but thankfully he has no intentions of hurting Farah. She is free to live in Prithian as if it was her own home. The only rule that she has been given is that she cannot leave. So that would be a recap of the first 30 chapters, which is where I have reached, and I do have some thoughts. As much as it pains me to say this, because I really did want to love this book, and I don't know, just be part of the excitement I see online about this book. I think the story is just okay. To be honest, if it wasn't for the popularity, I would have already DNF'd this book. I think I was a little bit bored, that's why I actually decided to take a break from it. In the first 30 chapters, so much happens, but at the same time, nothing happens. There are a lot of plot lines explored, but they don't seem to move the story ahead, which is probably why I momentarily lost interest in this book, because so much is happening, but it's not moving the story ahead. The plot just seems to be meandering, making everything a little bit dull, even though the blurb of this book is very interesting. Another issue that I had with this book is that it starts off with Farah killing Tamlin's friend, and at no point does it really seem like I don't know, to me it didn't seem like he was mourning the death of his friend. Nobody in Prithian seemed like they were mourning the death of this guy. It was mentioned in passing, but never explored deeply to a way that you can truly feel like it was a huge loss for them. And to add on to that, Farah isn't a prisoner or a captive of it or anything like that. In fact, she's been taken away from extreme poverty, and she has been given the chance to live in a place that is just full of wealth and riches, and she really does not struggle at all while in Prithian. That just felt a bit odd to me. I would have thought, at least in the beginning, maybe there would have been a bit of friction, maybe, I don't know, distance or a bit of hostility towards Farah, just a bit, and there was from one of the characters, but even that was short-lived, and Farah genuinely became close with all of them, which didn't make sense. I feel like in the beginning, if they're gonna be so dramatic about the death of this fairy and Tamlin mentioning this fairy was his friend, then at least there should have been moments where it truly felt like they were mourning the loss of a fairy that was cared about and cared for, and I never saw anything like that in the book. Another thing is the relationship between Farah and Tamlin. From the book blurb, we already know they become each other's love interests, but somehow it does not feel like their connection was built up that well. You can accept it, but I don't necessarily get excited at the prospect of them being a couple. I feel like it came out of nowhere and it wasn't built up enough. I think if I was to sum up my thoughts, I would say that the book is not really living up to all the hype that it gets. But even with that said, I'm not giving up. For one, I do know I'm gonna finish the entire book, so maybe at the end of it I'll be excited. If not, I've still had some people say that the first book was not that great, but it gets so much better if you read the second book. Finally, the rating section of all the books that I've mentioned. Out of 5 stars, what does each book get? Book number 1, The House in the Cerulean Sea. I'll give this 3 stars. The preachy aspect of the story was annoying, but other than that, I did like the world building and I did like the characters. Book number 2 is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I will give this 2 stars only because I didn't connect with the story at all, and while I think it's a book that is obviously well written and it is a good story, it just wasn't a story for me. Malibu Rising gets 3 stars. It's also another well-written book with a good story. It gets 3 stars because I can't say that I connected deeply with the story, but I enjoyed it and I liked it. So it's an okay book and I'll give it 3 stars. The next book is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I will have to give this book 1 star because this is another book that just wasn't for me. I couldn't bring myself to like the story or find any interest in whatever was happening. Finally, book 5, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Akasha gets 2 stars, and that's only because so far I feel like the story is meandering, a lot is happening, but it's not explaining the story or pushing the story forward. However, I am hoping that as I continue reading the book, things are gonna get much better. And that is it for this video. As usual, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more. Give this video a thumbs up and leave me a comment below.